All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. This is voting list number 7. We're going to start off with Senate Bill 744. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a walkthrough of the bill. And council, please correct me if I misrepresent something or I don't fully explain something. And then I know that we've got a couple of inserts with this first amendment that we're going to go over. So just help out whenever you can, okay, Josh? All right. Let's start off with the amendment 713126/1. It should be on your packet. It should be the first lengthy amendment in your packet. I want to just walk through the bill. And what I'd like to do is adopt this amendment, and then I know there's some members may have more amendments, and so I'd like to adopt this and then work from this with all future amendments. Does that work with everyone? All right. All right. So if you go on, the first substantive changes are on page 3. As the bill initially came in, it expanded delinquency jurisdiction for 4 crimes. It had for handgun or firearms related offenses, weapons offenses, 3rd-degree sex assault, theft of a motor vehicle, and a crime involving animals under Title 10, Subtitle 6 of the criminal law article. This amendment strikes everything, retains the firearms related offenses, and we'll talk about how we carve that up a little bit more as well, and keeps the 3rd-degree sex offense. The 3rd degree, so the regulated firearms offenses, we removed 5-139, which is a false statement on an application. We also added, you'll see 5-203, which is sawed-off shotguns. So these are regulated firearms and sawed-off shotguns. It's similar to what the House did in that regard. Council, do you want to just, can you have both of us there? Council, want to say anything else?
I can go through and say what each of those are if you want me.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead and go through each section of
yeah, so section 4-203 of the criminal law article is wear and carry. Section 4-204 is use of a handgun in a crime. Public safety, section 5-133 is possession of a regulated firearm. 5-134 is the sale or transfer of a regulated firearm. 5-136 is straw purchases. 5138 is the sale, transfer, or disposal of a stolen firearm. Section 5-141 is participation in a straw purchase. 5142 is the obliteration of a serial number. 5-203 is possession of a short-barreled rifle or shotgun. And 5703 is ghost guns.
all right. So does everyone understand? You can take Josh off for a second. All right, just before we move on of the first substance, everyone understands how we're contracting the delinquency jurisdiction? What that means? Okay. The next substantive change is on page 5, and you'll go down and make sure it's correlated with this one too. Go down on lines 28. So Senator Carter, we've just gone over the first page, page 3, the contracted delinquency jurisdiction. We're going to go over the amendment. That's the first one on top of your packet. I'd like to adopt that and then work off of that for future amendments. And so we're just walking through the amendments right now. So page 28, you'll see that so when a complaint is submitted, the intake officer shall make that inquiry. Initially, the code says 25 days. We shrunk that down to 15 business days. Now, the second part, which is new, is that if the law enforcement officer requests that the intake officer authorize detention for that child, and the intake officer does not authorize detention, then they have to make that decision within 2 days. So it shortens the amount of time for which they have to make that decision, expedites the process. Does everyone understand? Okay. Next, we'll move on to page 6. Am I missing anything? Did I miss anything? Okay. Okay, yeah. So now we're on page 6, which is, this is the if you go from lines 12 and 13. So if DJS does not file this petition, this is the forwarding of all felonies and the above mentioned firearms offenses that we added in or that we've curtailed. So that's the the mandatory forwarding. And then we, at the bottom of 28, which we'll revisit in a second, bottom lines, sorry, anything else? Bottom lines 28 through 32, you'll see that we struck this out. We removed the forwarding of new offenses if the child was on probation at the time of the allegations. We're going to revisit that in a second. Actually, is that insert?
No.
No.
We're not gonna do-
Okay, well, yeah.
And then the forwarding of failed intake.
This also, with the forwarding of failed informal or failed
Yeah, so
intake.
that's the unnumbered lines on page 7.
Okay. That's right. Okay. And then, did this version take out the Strawder bill
Yeah.
language? Okay, so
But it's the forwarding, so if you want to talk about it in the same.
you want to go ahead? Yeah.
Yeah, so also, on page 7, beginning with the unnumbered lines, in this subsection F, so this is adding a new forwarding requirement where DJS conducts an informal adjustment with the child and the informal adjustment fails. So if DJS does not petition that case to the court themselves, they would now be required to forward that to the state's attorney.
Which they say that they do anyway, right? That's
Usually, yeah.
they said it's usually, I mean, and I know DJS is here, so if we misrepresent something, please feel free to chime up, but
Except for any offense or just the ones that we're concerned, for any offense.
that's for, they say that this is practice anyway, so this is,
It's supposed to be.
Yeah.
but
You skipped over 5.
Yeah, so that's now the new mandatory sentence.
where is that right here? That's, yeah, we're gonna get to that. Yeah. All right, so then we remove, you'll see the lines 17 through 20 is removed from this bill, but it's going to be retained in the second bill on the voting list, which is the Nicaila Strawder Memorial Act. That's being taken out of this bill. It remains the same in the second bill on the list. And then the second here is what you were talking about, Senator West, section 5. So we removed motor vehicle theft out of delinquency jurisdiction. The way we handle it is we put it into this mandatory sins petition filing for auto theft. This mimics what the Nicaila Strawder bill does, but for auto theft. So the first part of that language is here. You'll see it again in subsequent pages. So we'll go over that when we get there, but you'll see this, the tail end of this language there. So this, you know, this is the mandatory petition, the complaint to DJS. DJS must file with the circuit court, which is the juvenile court, and then it's the same process as the Nicaila Strawder bill. So, intake officer, was this the failed informal?
Yep.
So at the bottom, it's number
That-
2.
we
We
already
already
did
did that. You just did that. Okay.
Page 8 for the report on arrest.
Yeah. So it's the next one. Do they have the same blank page in between?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so Josh is going to go over this language, but remember we wanted to create a paper trail for when there's an arrest. So there are amendments the chiefs and sheriffs requested, and I think everyone agreed with that there should be some language in there that allows for the law enforcement officer diversion. Subsequently, Senator Carter and some others have brought up some other information that would be very useful to incorporate in this paper trail. So I'll kick it over to council. You'll see that the language is pretty clear here, but Josh, you can further explain.
So it starts on page 8 of 23, line 26. So the way the bill originally came in, it required that whenever a child is arrested by a law enforcement officer, the law enforcement officer had to file a complaint with DJS. So what the amendment does is instead of requiring a complaint, it just requires a report. And as you can see, our language is actually the same language that was passed by the Judiciary Committee in the House on this point. So it just requires a report to DJS, which details which actions a law enforcement officer has taken, including if they've sent them to a diversion program.
No, I think we may entertain a forthcoming amendment that is more prescriptive for some of the reporting requirements. Senator Carter, I know we discussed some of that, but we'll get to that when we get there. So, I'm sorry, Senator West.
I'm sorry. I should have asked this a long time ago. The intake officer has an awful lot of discretion. Who is the intake officer and who does the person work for? What organization?
It's DJS.
It's DJS.
That's right.
So a cop arrests a youth and brings him in, and DJS comes in and is the intake officer.
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll go on to page 9. This is the same language for the handgun offenses, for the
Yep.
firearms offenses. Page 9, you'll just see that's the tail end of that same language for the firearms offenses
For pre-hearing detention.
for pre-hearing detention. Let me see.
So we're clarifying the firearms offenses as it was.
Yeah, you want, I mean, you actually, is that the insert we can use for?
No, not that part.
Okay. All right, and then page, skip over to page 10.
This is the 1 year to 2 years and then the 90-day piece.
Got it. All right, so on page 10, we the child was adjudicated delinquent at least twice, and it was before it was in 12 months, and this bill puts it at 2 years. And then below there, you'll see that the child was under supervision of DJS when the alleged act occurred. In the alleged act, if committed by an adult, would be penalty of imprisonment more than 90 days. You'll see that that's struck. And so then you'll have your first insert is insert number 1, which may not be. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and read it, so it'll if you look at the insert, it's got on page 10 of 23 instead of lines 3 through 6 being struck, they will now read. You'll have that?
I think
All
they
right.
should, yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So it's, this is pre-hearing detention for misdemeanor, so it would be pre-hearing detention for a misdemeanor would be allowed if, 1, the child was under the supervision of the Department of Juvenile Services when the alleged act occurred, and 2, the alleged act, if committed by an adult, would be subject to a penalty of imprisonment of more than 2 years, unless the act, if committed by an adult, would constitute assault in the second degree. So it would be just carving out second degree assault from that carve out.
Yeah, we can talk more about that, but we'll keep moving on. Next, you'll just see that the waiver language is retained. So if you're detained in DJS facility, there's a hearing that's required every 14 days. There's a one-time waiver that's put in here. If the state's attorney, the counsel for the child, and the court all agree, that can be waived once. Okay, then back to the probation. We bumped up probation for felonies and for misdemeanors, but we also extended the back end of increments for how long that those could be extended for, from 3 to 4 months initially in the bill. We're now taking it back to 3 months, which is what was retained in the original statute. But the tail end, meaning the length of time in which you could be under probation, still remains the same under the amendment, which is new for misdemeanors and felonies.
Technical stuff?
See, it's at the second insert.
No,
Yeah.
well, yeah, it is. First, we're
Alright.
striking out the definition of,
Let's get over with the lead thing on page 10 about.
yeah, It says the technical violation.
Oh, yeah, that's part, we're gonna talk about that right now. Yep. All right, so these are initially failing to meet, going to treatment, or make meetings, things like that, of that nature, was considered to be a technical violation under the statute, under JJRA. The bill as it came in, said that you could have, what we did was we put in, the bill came in and said 2 technical violations was not 2 missed meetings was not a technical violation. Okay. So then this language right here has, you initially could have it probation extended if you missed 2 violations and good cause was shown and you missed at least twice. The court could extend your length of probation. They could basically reset it. They could reset the length of your probation. So you have an insert. Is this the insert in here?
Yeah.
Second one?
2.
Yeah. Which is another change. This is a change on top of the change. So the insert now would read, if you have the insert on page 12 of 23, lines 4 through 8. If you can read that, go ahead. Sandy.
So basically, substantively what would change in the sort of amendment to the amendment was that the court would not be able to reset your probation if it finds that the child has substantially completed the treatment program despite the unexcused absences. It sort of reorganizes the provision, but that's really the only substantive change. That this would not apply if the court finds that the child has still managed to complete the program in substance.
And that's based on our conversation that we had, Senator Carter. Okay, law enforcement alleges commission of acts by child 13. That's the, so we strike out the rest of the Michaela Strader language on the bottom of 12. Let me see.
And then the mandatory sins.
And the mandatory sins for the auto theft is in on the top of 13. So we're essentially striking out the Michaela Strader language out of this bill, because that's going to remain in Senate Bill 2. And then we're adding in, this is the second part of the mandatory sins petition for the auto theft. That's what's right under there. And then if you go farther down page 13, you'll see this is codifying the Thrive program. So include programs developed for youth at the highest risk of being a victim or a perpetrator of gun violence. And then under there is codifying language to include programs developed for youth involved in motor vehicle theft. So you have to address them, instead of putting them into delinquency jurisdiction, you've got two ways you're dealing with them. One is this programming that's going to be required for DJS to administer. And then two is the mandatory sins petition.
That entails them, part of that is a comprehensive 3-year plan.
Just requires them to develop.
It just,
programs.
yeah,
So the plan, so it's not gonna be implemented yet. You gotta wait 3 years for that.
no. Honestly, if you talk to, they're developing it right now, but once this goes into effect, it's going to have to be operational, but they are about to launch this program now. And Thrive has been launched in 3 jurisdictions. Is that right? 4 jurisdictions.
They have to reissue this plan every
Yeah,
year.
but they have to reissue it every year. Okay, the rest is just the commission, right?
And they will repeal the state advisory board.
Yeah, so we take out, the rest of it is essentially you take out the juvenile justice monitoring unit was initially put in here. That unit resides in the office of the Attorney General. Can you take off that folder? That unit resides right now within the office of the Attorney General, so that removes it, because initially it was going to be tasked with evaluating DJS programs and offering solutions for gaps in programming. This is a discussion for next week, but we're going to, I think conceptually, we're going to combine the JJMU and the Correctional Ombudsman into something different, separate and apart. So that's coming out of this bill. Second is we add to the commission, we add, what are we calling them? What are they called?
The consortium.
The consortium representatives, 2 members of the consortium from the
Coordinated
from-
community support.
from the coordinated, what is it called?
Consortium on coordinated community supports.
Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports, which is a blueprint initiative. And they made an announcement last week of $111 million of grant money that's been distributed to help out with mental health supports, substance abuse, referrals that come from our public school system in Maryland. So they had $380 million of requests, but only $111 million was available. So that's what they gave. So 2 members of that consortium are going to be on there now. The chiefs and the sheriffs are going to be on there now. And I know there's an AFSCME amendment, which we will, I just received, I know the House added into it. It'll either be retained during conference, but we'll add them on as well. And then who else is added? Do we do anything
That's
else?
it for us with the House.
I think that's it. We also move up the implementation date to July 1st
For all the commission.
for all the commission, yeah. So that is the amended bill. I'd like to adopt this to work off of this for future discussion. So so it's been seconded. Is everyone okay with that? Excellent.
And the amendment includes the 2.
Yeah, and the amendment includes the 2 inserts. So now the bill is before you as amended, and we'll open it up for further discussion. Senator Carter.
Thank you. I wanted to finish my soup, but first of all, I want to applaud you on attempting to make the bill better and taking input from a number of different people, including me. I think it's a much better product than what we started with. I also still question the very necessity for the bill. But the one additional change that I would propose, and I have an amendment that's been drafted, but it was a much longer amendment based on other things that have already been changed in the bill. So I'd like to just read the section that I'd like to amend, and then I'd like to have a discussion about it. The part involving the expanded jurisdiction for the 10 to 12-year-olds for the guns and for the sex offenses, where I think it was the right thing to do to take out the auto thefts and the animal cruelty. I don't know. I understand that, you know, guns are a huge problem, but I also have information that the number of 10 to 12-year-olds with guns or in possession of guns is pretty small number. I also believe that if a kid 10 to 12 years old is in possession of a gun, there's a lot of inquiry needed as to why they had the gun and what we need to do to help them understand the inherent danger in such a thing. And so, in my view, putting them in the delinquency posture is not the smartest thing to do. Because if you put a kid in the delinquency posture, you can absolutely arrest them, because we allow, even under the current law, an arrest. It's just you can't be detained or charged. So if you put them in delinquency posture, they ostensibly still get, to many people's horror, to potentially be at home while they're awaiting a decision for prosecution and while they're awaiting prosecution. And here's the big deal. In the overwhelming majority of those cases, there's no prosecution that's ever going to happen. And the reason that there's no prosecution that's going to happen is the majority of these kids are going to be found incompetent to stand trial. So you then have a kid that had a gun that we all agree we want to immediately have an intervention. We want to immediately get to the bottom of what's going on. We want to offer services, programs, and any kind of education, treatment, or therapy that's needed, any intervention that's needed. I think the way that we do that, the way that we get there, is either through mandatory diversion or through sins. I think holding them in a posture of pending a prosecution is not it may appear to be, to use the word that everybody's been using about these young people, it might appear to be the way to hold them accountable, but in reality, it's actually not the best thing. The best thing would be to do an immediate diversion or an immediate sins petition and get them services, rather than have them sit there for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, waiting for a prosecution, and then having an incompetency petition that's inevitably going to be filed for any kid 12 and under. Inevitably, a competency petition will be filed. And then having them determined incompetent, and then having no prosecution occur. Most likely having it dismissed. If it pens longer than a year, it's dismissed under the statute. If competency is not determined within a year, it's generally dismissed anyway. So then nothing happens. But if we were to take that same kid and intervene and provide services through diversion or through sins, and not just be jumping toward this idea that because it's a gun, we got to have him prosecuted, I think we would be doing, I think it'd be a more sound decision. So that's my foundation for my amendment, and here's how the amendment reads. Upon the finding of probable cause by the law enforcement officer or Department of Juvenile Services for an alleged act committed by a child at least 10 years old and under the age of 13 years old, that child shall be placed in a diversion program or subject to an emergency child need of supervision petition if the alleged act, if committed by an adult, would constitute, and then it lists all of the gun offenses in the bill, as well as all the other offenses that were attempted to be moved into the delinquency posture. Any questions on my amendment?
I'd like to say, I really, first, thank you for working with us on this, and I appreciate we've gone back and forth on this a lot, and I really do appreciate that. And I thought, like, intellectual honesty is the number one thing and of paramount importance when we're dealing with this. So on both ends of the spectrum, you know, the folks that are saying that this is, you know, mass incarceration, going to throw a ton of people in jail, are completely false and wrong. And the folks that are not acknowledging the delinquency or the expanding delinquency too far is going to sweep in more children that are going to be incompetent to stand trial and to go through this process. And then it sets you along on this decision tree that runs afoul of all of our goals, which is to get services and to prevent further crime and to rehabilitate and to get moving on. So I appreciate the honesty on that. And I think when we had our hearing on this bill, the two things that were, I thought, most revealing to me was the incompetency. I mean, you go back to where before JJRA was put in place, 2/3 of folks under 10, the 10 to 10, 11, 12 crowd are going to be found to be incompetent to stand trial just because of their age. And so I'm sensitive and understand that. And I thought that was very instructive. And that's why I think curtailing the expansion of delinquency jurisdiction to these two things is important. Now, with regard to the firearms, I think you're right. First, one thing is when you expand the delinquency jurisdiction, it is all discretionary. So there's no mandatory charging, no mandatory, sentencing, or no mandatory jail time, going into a juvenile detention facility. So discretion is still there, although it is a more adversarial process. I think this is an acknowledgement, and it's a very small population. For violent crime for youths, under 10% in Maryland, I think, it gets outsized media attention, but we're talking about a very, very small population of people. And then with regard to these gun crimes, which are very serious, it's an even smaller population. So I think this is an acknowledgement that there are some things that are so serious that there's something going on at home. There is potentially a serious public safety risk, that the option has to be there for the court to take a deep dive, balancing all of the factors and decide. And these are tough decisions and it's a policy call, but there are some situations in which are just so serious that it necessitates this option. And again, under SINs, you can still be, I guess, you can arrest, but you can't be put into a facility with other delinquent children under that. And you can't be forced to the SINs process, which we hope we fix through this bill and through education. And I know Secretary Schiraldi has done a lot of that work, has not worked, and most jurisdictions don't use it. That's not our fault. That's an implementation fault. So I think given the seriousness of the offenses and the options available, it's important to retain this piece. I think we've curtailed it, acknowledging the delinquency expansion can result in more incompetency hearings and put us on a chain that we don't want to go down. So for that, I would say I would reject the amendment, but I'm open to further discussion.
So really quickly, and I'll let other people talk, but I just want to quickly respond. So there are offenses that are serious, and a young person in possession of a gun, no matter what the age, is always a cause for alarm. But I want to make it clear so that people understand, we are only talking about the possession of a gun. We're not talking about a crime of violence committed with a gun, which is already subject to the juvenile court jurisdiction. The legitimate concern, because I don't believe this would impact that many actual children, because there aren't that many 10 to 12-year-olds that are in possession of a gun. Let's hope that does not greatly increase. What it would do, though, is it would send the message to law enforcement that 10 to 12-year-olds are now okay to police, to overly police, because you can get them on something. And I don't think that's the right message to send, because honestly, I don't think there is any parent in this room or in this body with a 10, 11, or 12-year-old that would want them over policed. I think they would want them to be subject to services. And I'll just reiterate, they're more likely to get the services through diversion or SINs than they are through prosecution. And even if they get them later, even if they get services, they're going to get them later after they go to court. So you're talking about a lot of downtime where something could be happening, but nothing would be happening because of putting them in this posture. I'll be quiet now. But
no, I'm saying the same elements are for that on the policing level are still present with the SINs, but because you're gonna have to make an arrest and then there's a SINs process and petition filed. So like I see what you're saying, but there's still that initial engagement is still present with the SINs process too. Senator Sidnor.
If there was a motion, I just wanted to second it because, and again, I don't want to repeat what Senator Carter said, but I also wanted to add that under Sen's referrals that court allowment is still, courts can still be involved. So again, and I've said this since the initial hearing, I want to make certain that how we move forward is based on good, solid data and not because of reporting out in the press. And I believe that this is probably a good way to go. And as Senator Carter made mention, I do also appreciate everything that you and have done to bring this bill to the point that it is. It's in a much better posture. But I think with a few of these tweaks that we've been talking about, it could be even better. So thank you.
Contributions to this conversation. I think it's really valuable, and I'm still a member of this committee who is learning. So I think this is a question for the chair, although maybe you want to defer to Jamie. I just want to understand, because her amendment obviously deals with the gun offenses. It also deals with third-degree sexual offenses, right? So can I guess to the chair or Jamie, can somebody just describe to me what type of offense a 12-year-old would be committed that would be a third-degree sexual offense? Because I know a third-degree sexual offense does involve sometimes age differences, so those would not be included. So what types of?
So he'll read the statute, but it's, I mean, I think strangulation, it's use of a firearm or a weapon. And then it's everything you would think of except for penetration, but you can read the actual statute. Go ahead. Can you?
So it's a person may not engage in sexual contact with another without the consent of the other, and one, employer display a dangerous weapon or physical object that the victim reasonably believes is a dangerous weapon. 2, suffocate, strangle, disfigure, or inflict serious injury on the victim or another in the course of committing the crime. 3, threaten or place the victim in fear that the victim or an individual known to the victim will be subject to imminent death, suffocation, strangulation, disfigurement, serious injury, or kidnapping. Or 4, commit the crime while aided and abetted by another. And then it's some age differences which don't really apply.
Would be all of those pretty terrifying things and
Correct.
a 10, 11, or 12-year-old.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I too want to reiterate my appreciation for Senator Carter and her incredible hard work on this bill. And I really respect what she's trying to do in this amendment. I'm a little nervous about the unintended consequences of the amendment and what behavior we may accidentally fail to rein in here. So there haven't been many school shootings in Maryland, but there have been some. And of course, there's been school shootings across this nation. And I've got 3 kids in school, and it's horrifying. It's horrifying to think that this could happen in our schools, and it keeps happening. And so what this amendment does unintentionally is it says a secure housing is only provided for school shooters if they complete the act of school shooting and people are hurt. But if the child is, indicated an intention to commit a school shooting, brings the weapon to school, and happens to be caught by a security guard or a teacher before the school shooting actually occurs, then secure housing is disallowed for the child under this amendment. And so what it's saying is you get a different treatment whether you completed the act or you didn't complete the act. And I don't think that is your intention, and I don't think that should be a policy result that we look for. So I'm concerned about the amendment because as it relates to school shooters, it would not allow a secure facility for a school shooter who happens to have been prevented from the school shooting before it occurred, as opposed to a completed act.
All right, so you have the motion before you. Sure, yeah, of course.
There we go. So I don't think, when we say that, I want to just make sure that everybody understands the processes that are available. Because when you say school shooter, then that sends out all the alarms and puts everybody in a panic mode. Oh my God, as it should. But the myriad of offenses here of myriad possession of a gun have literally nothing to do with a school shooting. And that's would be a minuscule amount of times, but also an attempt under Maryland law is treated very much the same as the actual carrying out of the act. Under sins, no, there's not secured facility for delinquency, but there are other options like for DJS and even hospitalization if the person has a mental need for it. So it is not as if there's no option. And what I would like to have happen is an immediate intervention for that child, 10, 11, or 12, that would do such a horrific thing. Like, those things are horrific. And if a 10, 11, or 12-year-old is doing them, then they need to be addressed. I don't think that having them await a trial that's probably never going to happen and then giving them whatever sentence is available under the law is something that's going to really help. It's not likely to. Just like we've decided it's not likely to help for a myriad of other offenses. What would help, or is more likely to help, is an immediate intervention under a diversion and required diversion that gives them treatment and services, or a mandatory sentence that gives them treatments and services. And again, no, they can't be put in jail under sins, but they can be removed from the home and put in an environment that keeps them and others safe. That is what can happen under sins. It's just not jail.
It's a non-secure facility. Okay, so the amendment is before us.
Oh, move favor.
Okay, it's been seconded. So there's been a motion for favorable. We'll do a roll call. We'll be voting no on the amendment.
Vice Chair Waldstraker,
No on the amendment.
Senator Sidnor,
Yes.
Senator West,
No.
Senator Muse,
Pass.
Senator Folden,
No.
Senator James,
No.
Senator Charles,
Pass.
Senator Kelly,
A very respectful no.
Senator McKay,
No.
Senator Carter,
Yes.
Senator Muse,
Pass.
you want to abstain?
Yes.
Okay. Senator Charles,
I'll abstain with my Prince Georgian.
Chairman Smith.
No on the amendment. Respectful no. Okay, further discussion. Senator, yeah, of course, yeah.
I actually, and I did not have any time to put this in, but the initial, the way the legislation was initially done on page 10 with the removal of lines 3 through 6, I actually liked it. And I know when we just accepted the amendment to add the child under the supervision of the Department of Juvenile Services when the alleged act occurred and the alleged act, that language, I think I preferred how we had it without the pre-detention. And so the motion that I would make is that we reverted back to what it was prior to that amendment that we just put on.
No, I
Yeah.
yeah. So no, I understand. I had the same kind of consternation with the 90 days. And I think that the language before us ensures that we get some of the more serious offenses, but then doesn't incorporate something like a school fight. And I think that strikes the balance. And so is it perfect? You know, could we, maybe there's more refined analysis here for enumerated offenses potentially, but I think this is the cleanest way. This is the closest we can get in terms of balancing, ensuring public safety, but then also not sweeping in people for school fights, which I was very much worried about in the initial language. So I'm gonna oppose the amendment, but the amendment's before you.
Josh. Just for clarity, Josh, could you possibly list the majority or as many offenses that would be in 2 years and more, other than the second degree assault?
Not sure I have a good list right off the top of my head.
Okay,
I
was curious.
Yeah.
I know I appreciate the desire to take out the school fight, the second degree assault. I was just thinking there's likely to be other very minuscule things, even more minuscule than that, or more common for kids' behavior than that.
I think the amendment's been, we're gonna move on. All right, Senator Muse has an amendment. I'm just gonna,
Well,
do you want to? Josh, do it. I'm just gonna- all right.
So I think this does interact a little bit with some of the chair's amendments that we've already adopted, but essentially the amendment would, similar to the amendment that's already been adopted, it would remove the language that is redefining technical violation. So that part of your amendment has already been adopted, but the other piece of this amendment would be requiring that when a child has 4 or more unexcused absences from a court order treatment program, that the court be notified of that. And I assume you would also strike the language about extending probation in those circumstances. Okay. So instead of resetting probation when a child has 2 or more absences without good cause, this would instead require that when a child has 4 or more unexcused absences, the court would have to be notified of that fact.
And in addition, so is it an add-on to in 12 months, X happens, already adopted amendment? Then 4, we have an additional language that would involve court notification, or are they one substitutes out the other?
So I would defer to the amendment sponsor because the amendment was drafted to the original bill, which is different from
yeah,
what we've
that's-
already adopted. So I think
Senator
it's-
Hughes, can you help me?
it would be instead of that extension, correct? Yeah,
So
okay.
what would it be, the extension? So just to real close,
So-
the extension would be,
The-
and you're on, we're both on mics, that's
Right, so the piece about extending probation or resetting probation, I should say, when a child has 2 or more absences without good cause, that would be struck from the bill. And instead, 4 or more unexcused absences would require a notice to the court.
No, the reason why I'm fighting against this amendment because I think the language we adopted is actually quite good, and it was done in consultation with, I know, Senator Carter, but I think the good escape valve here is fail to appeal at a treatment program ordered by the court without good cause at least twice, unless the court finds that the child has substantially completed the treatment. And we had these discussions about someone getting far along the road and then getting tripped up by just two absences. And if there's a finding that if substantially completed that program, I think that there's a good escape valve there, but we can continue the discussion. Senator James.
I just wanted to also weigh in just that I really thank the committee and the collaboration on the language we have, which is the 2 unauthorized absences in 12 months. Because what I like about it is we're not trying to be punitive to children,
Got it.
but it gives early intervention for
Got it.
the system to extend probation. And remember, as I understand it, though, the probation is to ensure the child is getting services, wraparound services, and help them change behavior. And just like it takes certain amount of time to learn bad behavior, either from your community, your family, or from neglect or school, it takes a while, sometimes a lot longer than people realize, to help children modify behavior, adopt it, and then practice it. So I thought it was one of the best changes in this bill. And I fear that doing 4 or more is one, a lot. And I think you're waiting too long to intervene. And I'm not even sure that you're going to be enhancing the protections and services for these children. So I would be really worried if we got rid of the language we have, because I think it's such a great balance between competing interests and really gets us to where we should be. Thank you.
Senator James, I couldn't agree more. I think I misperceived what the amendment, the intention of the amendment was. So I think this part stays in place for the 2, but then for if there are 4 or more, then there's going to be a subsequent notice to the court. So I find that it's keeping what we put in place, the balance, but it's additional. So am I right, counsel?
Josh,
Yeah.
let's explain that.
Okay, so I think that was the intention of the spot. Am I right? Okay, got it.
Oh, to add, not.
Yeah, not to take away, but to add on. So I think that's fine with me.
That's different.
We can adopt that in concept. Is everyone okay with that?
Can
Okay,
I ask one more?
Sure, Senator James.
Or staff, in the 4 situations, the 4 events and the court notification, what does the court able to do, and all the parties, DJS, the child, parents, prosecutor, what are they able to do with that? Page. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think they would be able to modify the terms of probation or bring the parties in for hearing.
Right now, we cap it at 2 or 3 years, depending on with misdemeanor felony. So with this, so we already have that. So with the 4 or more and the court, is this provision in concept saying, guess what, the court can then reset it again and go another, 4 months or 6 months, up to another 2 years for misdemeanors, another 3 years for felony? Is that what that 4 or more is going to do?
No, so the 4 or more would simply be a notice to the court so that the court is aware of it. So the 2 or more, the 2 unexcused or now without good cause absences, that's what would allow the reset. So, if you had a reset for that, and then, you had the same problem with 2 more absences without good cause, you could reset again. But this piece is just a report to the court.
Because unless the court has some ability to weigh in, and I don't think they generally like to do it on their own initiative, but without some agency or prosecutor or just somebody, so they know, is that, and then what?
Right. I mean, to get the extension or the reset at this point, you'd have to have either the Department of Juvenile Services or the state's attorney come in and move for that. So the report to the court doesn't change that. I don't think the court could act on its own initiative, but it could set a hearing, try to get in touch with the department to maybe, yeah.
But if you're at
prompt
the end
action.
of your 2 or 3 year, really, you can't do any more than that anyway, unless you add something to the language, Senator Muse. It seems to me if you could give the court or the system some more tools in that circumstance, but right, if, given the court, now you're the court. I hope the court knows the 2 or more, or the 2, but with 4, we get the report, but maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth. I would think you would want to empower somebody to do more. And I mean, help the child, but just do more, or that's not what did you want to do other than let the court know? Did you want to have some people try to give some more, some more ability to help children?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
All right, that amendment carries unanimously. Okay, further discussion. Senator West.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm very pleased with where we're headed on this bill, but something Senator Carter said did cause me some difficulty, and that is that there's a big gap in time between the time that let's say hypothetically a juvenile commits a crime with a gun and the time you either get into court on the one hand, or you get into court for a sins petition on the other hand. You're not talking about a day or two. Senator Carter, you suggested it's a period of time. And it troubles me that once the youth's been arrested for that, the youth just goes home. And there are no services and no nothing for a period of weeks, perhaps, until a court hearing. Now, I'm not in favor of putting the juvenile behind bars, but I am troubled that weeks could pass after someone commits a crime like this without anything happening, no services, no nothing. And I don't know whether we're talking about an amendment for this bill or a different bill, but I wonder if other members of the committee are also troubled by this gap time.
I think that's a different bill in terms of implementation, but you're right. I mean, it's they have to file that, law enforcement should file within 15 days, and then they've got 15 business days to make that decision. And then the state's attorneys have another 30 days to make that decision. So we've talked about this timeline for a long time with DJS and with the Office of Public Defender and with the state's attorneys. I think that's a discussion deferred for this bill, but that is definitely something that we are keenly aware of.
So thank you for that, Senator West, because it really is a legitimate concern. And under current law, with these 10 to 12-year-olds for the guns not being under the juvenile court jurisdiction, there could be immediate action taken under another process. There could be. I'm wondering if, Mr. Chairman and others, if we should add additional language regarding the ability of DJS to still offer diversion, even though they're going to forward it to the prosecutor. But why not? Why not have, it could be something akin to crisis intervention to some extent. It could be, some immediate action taken, because if we believe that the possession of a gun is that deep of an offense, or the sex offense is that deep an offense, why wouldn't we have some immediate intervention? Why wouldn't we?
So we had this discussion. So just for the process, I mean, we sat, everyone in this room has sat down and gone over this bill line by line, but we also sat down with public defenders, state's attorneys, and DJS to go line by line on this bill. So Senator Carter, I guess they can do that now, couldn't they? I mean, I know that they could still offer diversion or services in this pocket of time before it goes to the court. I know there's potentially a disincentive for that if they know there's something coming at court, and then there may be, some sort of adverse decision at court. And so what's the incentive to engage? But they can do that now. So I agree with you, but I remember having that discussion, with the public defenders.
Look, my understanding is that SINs, and I believe, based on all of the discussions we've had about this subject all over the place, that we're likely to improve upon the SINs process greatly over the next months and years. So I believe that under that SINs process, we're putting those the auto thefts under, there can be an immediate intervention with SINs, immediate thing.
Can we do that like in line? Like you could just put that in. Go ahead, Josh.
So potentially looking on page 6 of 23 of the reprint, in this starting on line 9, paragraph 4, in going down to line 27, after that you kind of put in a new Roman numeral 2, which says nothing in this paragraph shall prohibit the intake officer from proposing an informal adjustment while the state's attorney is conducting their review under, you just cite the provision that governs the state's attorney's review. So it would say, nothing in this paragraph shall prohibit the intake officer proposing an informal adjustment while the state's attorney, makes their review under provision, whichever it is. I don't have it off the top of my head. So
Motion's been moved.
Second.
It's been seconded. Is everyone okay with adopting that amendment?
That's good.
Okay. Now that it's been incorporated, Senator Waltz-Reiger.
But I think we're there. I mean, I think we've adopted all the amendments that we've talked about. And so
Oh, sorry, Senator Charles has one. Sorry. Go ahead.
Does he have a copy?
Do you have a copy of Senator Charles's amendment?
no.
Which one?
I don't have an extra copy.
Just read it.
All right, Senator, we're just gonna make a copy of the amendments and distribute to the committee.
So on page 6 of 23, after line 27, there would now be a new Roman numeral 2, which would be, nothing in this paragraph shall prohibit the intake officer from proposing an informal adjustment while the state's attorney conducts their review under, and it's now going to be Roman numeral 4 of this paragraph, which is the provision which governs the state's attorney's review of the forwarded complaint. So it would just clarify that they can still move forward on an informal during that 30 days.
Yeah, you can read it.
Yes, it's already in the law.
Yeah, let me see if it's identical to.
So we're just checking to make sure that the first part, subsection C, is identical to what's already in the adopted bill, and then you're asking for subsection 1 and 2 to be incorporated, right? If all those elements of reporting,
Yes.
is it the same?
No, it's not. Some differences between this amendment and what we've already adopted. For instance, what we adopted applies where a child is actually taken into custody. And this language would be if a law enforcement officer determines that a child could be taken into custody. So that's one difference.
We're taking the- we're not taking- we're just gonna, what you should just do is take subpart 1 and 2, which is the law enforcement officer shall include.
Commission on Juvenile Justice Reform. Like you're adding more on law enforcement instead of letting juvenile services do their job. That's their job to be that partner. So they. Stop.
Well, I mean, it's-
Do something when it's.
Reform.
Job, it's bad. Our kids every year.
Oh, you're on, never mind, you're on.
I'm just saying, we keep stacking more on law enforcement to do, and this is another example of that. But, you know, now we want them to complete a written law enforcement interaction report and forward it to juvenile services and the Commission on Juvenile Justice Reform and emerging best practices. That's a juvenile services job. Juvenile services to be the one. Law enforcement on an arrest, they submit the report forward. They're not, I mean, it goes in. Juvenile services is the failing component of this. They actually already have policies in place that they don't even follow for handling the dispositions of these arrested juveniles.
But it's our understanding that law enforcement wasn't always doing those reports, so it's not just a DJS issue, it's a law enforcement issue as well.
Where's the example of that? 'Cause I can tell you.
We had plenty of, I know in Baltimore County, what we found was that police were not using the SINS process. There was testimony earlier, talking about the fact that reports weren't being filed by police. So police have a role in this. It's not just, and I agree with you. DGS has some reforming to do, but it's not just.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in. So I actually agree with both of you. So yes, there was testimony that those reports are not being filed and there's no paper trail, exactly what Senator said. But yes, you can't be too prescriptive and too onerous. I do think this DJS should be responsible for receiving, housing, and distributing to the proper agencies for this information. So.
But also for the further notification of action.
Well, but we also, because we did, yes, that's right.
But like law enforcement is your initial presence.
Understood.
And then from
Yeah,
there.
I got
it's a handoff.
No, understood.
DJS gets the wraparound.
And we have created a paper trail process for the law enforcement in this bill
Yes.
that requires them to create that paper trail. With giving them the latitude to still do law enforcement diversion. So that's still in here. I do like some of the information you're requesting though. So let's just work through it a little bit. All right, we are this Senator Charles, this bill is going to conference. We will work together on this to make sure this is incorporated in conference, because this is going to take a more elaborate amendment. Because this is not going to be a part of that intake process. It's going to be an internal process for DJS that we're going to have to legislate. And I think it's something that we can't do on the fly. So with my promise to you, when we go to conference, we'll incorporate this information. I'd like to pass on this amendment. You can press, of course. I mean, it's not working right now with the time we have and the ability to draft it to the proper section of the code.
Work, because we've said that about quite a few things that we'll get a lot of details in conference, and I'm concerned if they're not in our bill and they're not in the House bill, how do we get them in?
We could do, the conference committee does that, but we can also do a floor amendment, which I'm happy to entertain too. A friendly floor amendment. That way we have time to draft it properly. And also for those other offenses that may be crazy, for the 2-year, we're going to dig through the code. I promised Senator Sidnor on that as well.
I'm also happy to sit with Senator Charles. And I think try to accomplish the solution that you're looking for with some meaningful language that we can submit. Together, if you're willing.
With everyone, I'm personally willing to work with everyone on coming up. I just want to make sure we do get this in. in a
You have my
timely
word.
manner. And so if the committee's willing to accept it as a friendly amendment on the floor, once we add this in, I think it's a fair exchange.
You have my word. Senator Muse and then Senator.
If we are clear on the language and we know what we want to do, can we still move the amendment today?
That's what I was saying. I was just talking to council about this. This is actually something that can't be done on the fly. It has to be drafted. I mean, it has to be drafted and thought out. This is why generally I don't like when we amend JPR bills on the floor, because you get yourself into weird trouble on the floor because, and I've said this several times, but last year it happened and people did things and a lot of unintended consequences because people didn't see around some corners. So I want to make sure we get it done right, and you have my word, we will do it, and it'll be a friendly amendment on the floor. All right.
Maybe, we talked about this, I'd also wanted some additional data on the reporting for police diversion regarding the individuals that they were diverting. So I think it's important, because if we're gonna still allow the discretion for diversion, we should know what kids they're diverting and for what. Gender, race, jurisdiction, we need to know this.
I actually 100% agree on that. So yeah, I 100% agree on that. So we will work that, and that will be a friendly floor amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the bill as amended.
Oh, sorry. So there's a motion for favorable and seconded. We can do a roll call.
Vice Chair Waldstreicher,
Yes.
Senator Sidnor,
Pass at the moment.
Senator West,
Yes.
Senator Muse,
Yes.
Senator Folden,
Yes.
Senator James,
Yes.
Senator Charles,
Yes.
Senator Kelly,
Yes.
Senator McKay,
Yes.
Senator Carter,
No.
Senator Sidnor,
No.
Yes.
Chairman Smith.
I was waiting. Yes. The bill passes what? 9-2? 9-2 with amendments. All right, we can take a deep breath here. We're going to move on to Senate Bill 2, but before we do that, I just want to say thank you to the committee. I know this has been a stressful subject, and I just respect and appreciate the level of professionalism and input and quality of debate that we engaged in to get this through. So it's not perfect. We'll get it through. More amendments forthcoming, but I just want to say thank you to every member of the committee. We'll now move on to Senate Bill 2, Senator Carter. Go ahead.
Senate Bill 2 establishes that if a law enforcement officer alleges the commission of an act by a child younger than age 13 that results in the death of a victim, the law enforcement officer must forward a complaint to the Department of Juvenile Services for appropriate action. And if a Department of Juvenile Services intake officer receives such a complaint, that the intake officer must file a petition alleging that the child is either delinquent or in need of supervision.
Senator Carter, do you have, we can do these in concept.
I'll defer to Josh or the committee. I just assume leave the bill as it is. But if there's a change that you think we should make, I'm happy with it. It's the way that we passed it last year. And I'm just happy that the bill is extracted. I'm sure the family will be happy that they have their own bill. So.
Motions for a favorable. Seconded. Is everyone okay being recorded in the affirmative?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Senate Bill 2 passes JPR unanimously. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. If you would like, do you want to jump on with the co-sponsor? All right. So I would like to as well. So Senator, let's do this one first. Senator Muse, Senator West, Senator Sidnor, Senator Waldstreicher, Senator Smith, Senator Charles, Senator Kelly. Anyone else?
One more time.
Senator Wallstreicher, Senator Sidnor, Senator West, Senator Muse, Senator Charles, Senator James, Senator Kelly, Senator McKay, Senator Smith.
Oh, wow, I'm excited. I don't think I've ever had a bill that everybody wanted to be on.
Oh, Sidnor's on, yeah.
So it's everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone except for Bolden.
And that's.
Yeah.
And that's for Senate Bill 2. Okay. All right. Is everyone okay with that amendment? All right. All right. So now we're gonna Senate Bill 744 amendment, sponsor amendment. Senator West would like to be on. Anyone else? All right. Senator West wants. Yeah. Senator James, Senator West. All right. That's it. Senator Folden. All right. Is that okay adopting an amendment? Excellent. All right, let's do this. We'll take a 5-minute recess and we'll go back to, well, that's JPR time. So I know you guys are gonna, all right. 5-minute recess and we'll come back for hearings.